Assalamu alaikum dear students. Hope you are all okay. So far we have talked about the parts of nervous system, gave you the brief idea about that. We have also talked about the particular meninges, protective coverings of brain. That means we are all set to talk about brain and the spinal cord, so that we will finish the central nervous system. Then we will talk about the other parts of the nervous system, human nervous system. If anyone is having any doubt, anyone is having any question, he or she can ask me the questions on phone, and there is the phone number which is shown on the screen, and you can call on this number. Now we shall talk about the central nervous system. So our today's topic is central nervous system. As I already told you, central nervous system includes two parts, brain and spinal cord. So there is brain, which is the part of central nervous system, and there is spinal cord, which is the part of central nervous system. Spinal cord. Once we are done with the brain, we will talk about the spinal cord. So let's talk about the brain in detail in today's lecture. It will take 2 or 3 lectures to complete the brain in, I can say, in its structure and functions. So let's talk about the brain today. Brain in biology, in a typical terminology, is also called as encephalon. It's also termed as encephalon. Therefore, the science that deals with the study of brain is called as encephalology. It's called as science that deals with the study of the brain. It's called as encephalology. 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 Examination point of view, this point was not so important to discuss. But why did I discuss this thing? It is because when we move ahead to the parts of the brain, the names will be resembling with this encephalon. The names of that or nomenclature of those parts, it will be resembling with the encephalon. So that was the only reason why I discussed the encephalon and encephalology. So I repeat, the brain in biology is called as encephalon, and the science that deals with the study of brain is called as encephalology. So my dear students, brain is located in, let's see the location first. It's located in the brain box, the cranium brain box, which is the particular chamber of in our body in which that particular brain is I can say safeguarded. So it is located in the cranium, also called as brain box. Brain box is guarded by cranial bones. It is guarded by cranial bones, or we can simply say bones of the brain box. Now, very important character about the brain, which we discuss while we talk about the basic things about the brain. It is the weight of brain. Brain weighs about 1200 to 1400 grams. 1200 to 1400 grams. Another thing which I must talk about is the number of cells present in the brain. Number of cells present in the brain, there is a rough estimate of that. There are about 100 billion neurons present in brain of an average human being. So 100 billion neurons are present in an average human being's brain. So very important thing that this weight, it's an average weight. It may vary from person to person, okay, depending on the age group and etc. And this number of neurons is not fixed number 100 billion. It may also vary. But there is a range of these things which is shown in the books and references and all that. So that's why we say the brain of the average human being weighs about 1200 to 1400 grams, and the number of neurons present in brain of an average human being, it's about 100 billion. Now let's talk about the structure of brain. While we talk about the structure of brain, it is divided into many parts. There are three parts. There are main three parts. So brain, it is divided into, structurally, it is divided into three main parts. Okay. These three parts are forebrain. Forebrain. Now there is midbrain. After that, there is hindbrain. Forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Forebrain typically is also called as prosencephalon. It's also called as prosencephalon. Midbrain is called as mesencephalon. Mesencephalon. And hindbrain is called as rhombencephalon. Rhombencephalon. Prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhombencephalon. What we have discussed so far, brain is divided structurally into three parts: forebrain or prosencephalon, midbrain or mesencephalon, hindbrain or rhombencephalon. Now, what are the parts of prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and I can say rhombencephalon? Prosencephalon or forebrain is the major part of the brain, and it encloses two or three main parts. Not two, it encloses three main parts. One is the olfactory lobes. Olfactory lobes, they are two in number. We will talk about that later on when we will talk about the forebrain in particular. And second thing, it is cerebral hemispheres. Cerebral hemispheres, because this is the part which is divided into two parts. It is the particular, what we can say, cerebrum actually, which is divided into two main parts. So it is cerebrum. We can call it cerebrum simply, or we generally call it cerebral hemispheres. Now the third part of it is diencephalon. As I already talked about this terminology, I told you that this terminology will match with this encephalon. So that's why we discussed that encephalon and encephalology. So midbrain, it has the two parts. One is optic lobes. They are also two in number. And another part of it is cerebral peduncles. Cerebral peduncles. When we talk about the hindbrain, rhombencephalon, it includes number one, cerebellum. Cerebellum. Number two is pons varolai. Pons varolai. Now there is third one, which is medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata. Brain divided into three main parts: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. The parts of forebrain are olfactory lobes, which are two in number, cerebral hemispheres, or simply we call it cerebrum, the largest part of brain, diencephalon. Midbrain has two parts: optic lobes, which are also two in number, and cerebral peduncles. Hindbrain has three parts. One is cerebellum, then pons varoli, and then there is the medulla oblongata. Let's talk about the first part, which is prosencephalon or forebrain. Now, prosencephalon, as you might have already gone through that part of this lecture, first part of the prosencephalon is olfactory lobes. It's olfactory lobes. Olfactory lobes are the parts which are associated with the smell. So these parts are associated with smell, perception of smell. They are located beneath the cerebrum, on the lower side of cerebrum. Cerebrum is the main part, or I can say the largest part of brain. We have not talked about that yet, but let me give you some brief idea about that. Cerebrum is the largest part of brain, so that means that part covers the all other parts of brain. So beneath that cerebrum there is the olfactory lobe, a pair of olfactory lobe located. So it is located beneath the cerebrum, on the interior part of that. Now, if we see the structure of that olfactory lobe, how it looks, it's a pair of bodies in which there is one olfactory bulb in one olfactory lobe and another in another. That means there is an olfactory bulb in each olfactory lobe, and then every olfactory bulb is connected to the olfactory tract. So what's an olfactory lobe made of? It's made of an olfactory bulb that's connected to an olfactory tract, and olfactory tract then is connected to the olfactory region of the brain. It's then connected to the olfactory region or area of the brain, which helps us in the perception of smell. So olfactory lobes are two in number. It's paired, it's associated with smell, it's located beneath the cerebrum, on the anterior part of the cerebrum. Okay, so if you have an idea about that, what anterior was posterior is, anterior part of the brain is the particular front part of the brain. This is the posterior part of the brain, and when we take the brain up, lower side is the ventral part and upper side is the dorsal part of the brain. We will talk about that when we will talk about the cerebrum, because cerebrum is the largest part of the brain, so it will help you in understanding all other parts, cerebrum only. So that's why till then you have to particularly have the brief idea about everything. Now let's talk about the second part of the forebrain, prosencephalon, that is cerebrum, or we also call it cerebral hemispheres. We call it cerebral hemispheres. Why? We will talk about that later on in this very lecture. Cerebrum is the largest part of brain. It is the largest part of brain, largest part in weight also, and it also covers maximum parts of the brain. So it is about 4/5 of the brain, 4/5 of the brain, and it covers most of other parts. It covers most of other parts, As I already told you, cerebral hemispheres we call it. Why do we call it cerebral hemispheres? Because cerebrum is a part of brain which is completely divided, into two hemispheres, two halves. So if we draw the diagram on the dorsal view, or I can say the dorsal view of the brain, I have already told you what dorsal means. So the top view of the brain, let me draw it. This is the dorsal view of the brain. Dorsal view of the brain. This is one hemisphere, left hemisphere. In anatomy, we say right side of our body is the left side of diagram, but here it will not be applied because it's the dorsal view. So there is a particular depression which divides the two hemispheres. This is the another hemisphere. So this is why we call it the cerebral hemispheres, because it's divided into two parts. This is the cerebral hemisphere. So these are hemispheres. The line which you see here, which divides it into two equal halves, it is the cerebral fissure. Surface of the particular cerebrum is not smooth. It has the depressions and the bulges, etc. So brain is not smooth. It has depressions and bulges. Okay, we will talk about that. So right hemisphere and left hemisphere are completely, I can say, separated from one another by the cerebral fissure or fissure. But on the lower side, when we go deep into the particular brain, we find that these two hemispheres are connected to one another. So if we see the particular side view of the brain, the lateral view of the brain, this view, so how will we find the brain? It is, or cerebrum, because we are talking about cerebrum right now. So we will draw the cerebrum in this way. So this is the cerebrum. This is then the cerebellum. We are going to talk about that. Okay. This is the cerebrum, for example. This is one hemisphere, and on the next side there will be another hemisphere. If we cut this brain into two equal halves from this very side, what we find in the depth, we will find a C-shaped part. The C-shaped part, it's actually made of myelinated axons. Myelinated axons. And its name is corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is the part which joins the right hemisphere with the left hemisphere. So corpus callosum, another thing which is very much important about the corpus callosum, it is the characteristic feature of mammals only. So it is made of myelinated axons. It joins the right hemisphere with the left hemisphere. Okay, on the upper part, right hemisphere, left hemisphere, they are separated, and when we go deep into the brain, okay, there is the cerebral, there is the corpus callosum which joins the two hemispheres. Okay, now there is one more thing, that corpus callosum and the particular side view of the particular, what we can say, cerebrum, it's clear to you. Let me talk about one more important thing, that outer areas of the brain, of the cerebrum, the outer regions of the particular cerebrum, or I can say surface of the cerebrum, it is made of gray matter. It's made of gray matter. Remember that we have talked about the gray matter when we talked about the parts of nervous system. So gray matter is actually the part of the brain which is made of only non-myelinated axons, and the cell bodies are cytons. So outer areas, or I can say the surface of the cerebrum of the brain, it's made of gray matter, and it's called as cerebral cortex. So cerebral cortex, the outer region of the cerebrum, it's made of gray matter, and we have talked about the gray matter. And the deeper regions of the cerebrum, it's made of white matter. It's made of white matter, and it's called as medulla. It's the medulla of the brain, deeper area, made of the white matter, and the outer areas, or I can say the surface areas of the particular cerebrum, it's made of gray matter and is called as the cerebral cortex. Cerebrum, as I already told you, it's not smooth, its surface is not smooth. Okay, if I draw the brain, or rather I can say the cerebrum, if I draw the cerebrum, okay, if I draw the cerebrum, its surface has some depressions and some bulbs. These bulbs are called as gyri and these depressions are called as sulci. Sulcus is the singular, gyrus is the singular, sulci is plural, gyri is plural. So there are sulci and gyri. It gives it the more surface area, it increases the surface area of the brain. More the surface area, more the number of neurons. Now, this hemisphere of the brain, cerebrum, this hemisphere of the cerebrum, I can say both the hemispheres of the cerebrum, it is divided into some other lobes. Now, each hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes. One is frontal lobe, okay, so there is a deep fissure which divides this frontal lobe from other parts. So this is the central fissure which divides the frontal lobe from the next one. And what is this lobe called? It is the parietal lobe. It is the parietal lobe. Now, parietal lobe is also separated from one another. That means there is one more lobe here. So that lobe is called as occipital lobe. Let me write it here. There is occipital lobe, another lobe of the cerebral hemisphere, frontal lobe, parietal lobe and occipital lobe. So there is one more lobe of the cerebrum. This is called as temporal lobe. Temporal lobe. 4 lobes. Cerebral hemispheres are divided into 4 lobes each. One is frontal lobe, parietal lobe is second, third is the occipital lobe, this one, and number next is the temporal lobe. Now there are the fissures which divide one lobe from another. So I have named already one. It is the central fissure which divides the frontal lobe from parietal one, and the fissure which divides the parietal lobe from the occipital lobe. It is, let me write here, parieto-occipital fissure. Parieto-occipital fissure divides the parietal lobe from the occipital lobe, and then the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe, they are separated from the 4th lobe, temporal lobe. So temporal lobe is separated from frontal and from parietal by a fissure which is called as lateral fissure. Lateral fissure. Let me repeat. Each cerebral hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes: frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal. And frontal lobe is divided from parietal by central fissure. Parietal lobe is separated from the occipital lobe by the parieto-occipital fissure, and frontal and parietal lobes are divided from temporal lobe by the lateral fissure. So this is the I can say the brief idea about the structure of brain, structure of the cerebrum, rather I can say. In the next video, we will talk about some other things related to the cerebrum. Then we will talk about the diencephalon, so that we are done with the forebrain. Thank you.